Alright, let's just say that you're ready to start working as a product manager. Should you choose to work in a startup or a well established company? I could tell you all about my experiences, but I've got a better idea. Let me ask Elon Musk. Yes, you heard that right. With the help of ChatGPT and an AI voice generator, my guest today is the man himself, Elon Musk.
Hey, this is Elon Musk, Visor. By the way, very nice podcast. Good job to you. So, what do you want to know?
Hey Elon, yeah, quick question. So, should I work at a startup even though all the data says that it has a 90% chance of failure?
That's a good question. I would definitely say go for the startup because, look, if you're passionate about the mission and ready for the challenge, go for it. Even if it fails, the experience gained can be valuable in the long run. But always have a backup plan though,
That's interesting. Hey, by the way, are you really gonna fight with Mark Zuckerberg?
Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask Mark himself?
Well, I guess I can. Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, this is Manan Zuckerberg. I'm ready. If Elon is ready, I'm ready. Let's do it.
This was absolutely insane. This is insane. I was just using ChatGPT to ask what would Elon Musk say if I asked him whether I should work at a startup, and then there is this voice generation app. Mark, Elon, if you're listening to this, highly unlikely, please don't sue me. This was just for fun, and I have no idea how this is even legal. But anyways, enough of me being silly. Let's start with the real podcast. And my real guest today is a product builder, an early stage operator, investor, and a writer. And let's focus on the latter because the reason why he's today is that he just released a new book, The Startup Product Manager. This book serves to empower the next generation of product managers, business builders, and startup entrepreneurs.
So my name is Manan. I'm currently a product manager at an early stage startup right now. So I've been in early stage startups for my entire career so far.
Manan, so the Startup Product Manager, what inspired you to write the book, and how is that related to all the experiences that you've had so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think the reason why I wrote the book primarily was because I think product management is a great way to learn about one, how to build from the ground up. So what I mean by that is like you learn how to identify problems that are out there and learn how to build solutions and work with teams to be able to execute on that. I think it's a very creative role and a practical role in the sense that you learn how to build, and then I think you also learn like how to build a business in the process too. I think right now, product management, a lot of product managers that we think of, a lot of them have worked at big tech companies, and I think working in big tech is a great experience. Previously, I worked at Adobe, so I think I've gotten a chance to get a glimpse of like what it's like to work in product adjacent roles like in larger tech companies and see like your impact. And so typically in big tech, you get to work, if you're a PM, you get to work on a project or a feature or a new launch that would affect maybe hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people. And so to startup, I think you have a unique chance. Similarly in big tech, you have that opportunity too, but you have the chance to work on a lot of features from the ground up, 0 to 1 features that you can help scale over time. And a lot of those features directly impact like the business growth over time. And so you get to see how everything that you work on directly impacts revenue of the company. And sometimes in a startup, like things are kind of like life or death. And so I think it's important to kind of like have some startup experience as a PM eventually in your career at some point, because I think it teaches you a lot about how to adapt to different situations. And I think it's just as important as working different types of companies and getting that exposure over time. And so I think it's just one kind of perspective in terms of like how you can learn how to build things and learn how to build a business or be an investor one day if you're interested in that too.
So you mentioned startups, and you also had a lot of experience in startups, as you mentioned. But how does a startup product manager differ from a product manager in a well-established company? What are the key challenges that you think accompany a startup product manager?
Yeah, definitely. So I think in a startup environment, your role isn't necessarily clearly defined from the get-go, I'd say. I think as a product manager at a startup, you're faced with a lot of unknowns. And so when you're at a startup, especially depending on the stage of product market fit, You might be at a company that's pre-product market fit, at product market fit, or post-product market fit when you're trying to scale. And so at every stage, there's different types of problems that you'll have to, decide that you want to solve and solutions that you want to create for them. So I think at a startup, especially, it's kind of like a game of prioritization. And similar to big tech, like you're constantly thinking about different opportunities that you can pursue as a product manager. And I think at a startup specifically, you constantly have to like wear multiple hats. And so beyond being like a product manager that ships features, you're gonna have to be working with a lot of different teams, and so you'd coordinate a lot of efforts across sales, customer success, engineering, design, marketing, a lot of different teams that are involved in the whole process. And so I think in a startup you learn how to build stuff, but then you also learn like how to sell stuff too.
Mhm.
And so I think that is a great tie-in into like how like building a startup is unique. And so building a startup, you learn like how to build from 0 to 1, as mentioned before. And then you also
Mhm.
learn like how to distribute that and keep scaling that and growing that over time.
Awesome. And I mean, I have a question that I pretty much I know the answer, but I just want to reconfirm. So, if you're talking to a new product manager, aspiring product manager, which our audience is about as well, and they have both two offers in hand. One is about a startup that they got offered the product management, and another one is a well-established company. Which one would you suggest them to take, and why?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's no right answer to that. I think in terms of whether you want to go to a startup or like big tech company, I think it's important to see who you would work for and the surrounding team. So I think at a startup, the exciting thing about working at a startup is that typically if you're at a startup that's Series A, sometimes Series B, you'd either work directly with usually the head of product or even the founders.
Hmm.
So what I mean by that is that when you're at a startup, usually at Series A before, you get to work sometimes directly with the CEOs or even founders of the company. So CEO, COO, CEO, CTO. You get the chance to work with executive teams from the get-go. And that involves also like learning like how to build a product team from the ground up. And so if you join a startup, you might have the chance to be like a founding
Exactly.
manager, and then like essentially like learn like how to build a team over time. The thing about working in big tech that I find is interesting is that sometimes you can work under an experienced product manager who has potentially founded a company before, even like started scaling startups in the past, has had that experience over time. And so I think working in big tech is also a great route too, in the sense that you're working under someone who's had that experience and you get to learn from them directly. And I would say it's a much more um, you know interesting way of learning, in the sense that you get to learn from someone who's like done it before. But I think everyone should experience at some point having a bit of both, and going down either path.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when I reflect upon my journey, I started a well-established company, but then for the rest of like more than 50% of my career was the startups. So this question I wouldn't know how to answer as well, but just like a slight percentage of me says go to a startup because as you said, like you have exposure to all the people and you have firsthand experience with all of them. Okay, so let's just say that a startup founder or like a founder, someone has a great product idea, they're building a product, they have a great team. An important factor, of course, is to learn what many investors look for. And that is also a point that you touch in your book. And of course, whenever there's a startup, investors are already a major, major role into the success of it. What can you tell us more about what investors look for when you're building a product from scratch?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially for early stage, most investors, they look for the following. So one, they look at the product. So I think as a product manager, like you have to really like understand your product like in and out, in terms of like how like the user flow works. Like you use your product, like actually like go through the experience, like see the different parts of it. So one is like product, like overall, like do you know your product well? And then two is like what problem does it solve and how well does it solve it? So I think one bucket is like product. The second is like market. So what is the overall market that you're solving problems in, and what are you creating solutions for? Like how big is that market? How consolidated is that market? How competitive is that market? Like are there mergers and like acquisitions happening in that market? Are there private equity roll-ups happening? Like there's a lot of different factors within
Hmm.
the market itself. So I think there's a lot of like tailwinds and headwinds you can consider within the market, but overall, like one, product, two, market, three, I would say, is more so like the team. So especially at the early stage, like I think the team is probably the most important factor you have to evaluate. just because like if you hear about these stories from like founders that went through Y Combinator or like a lot of these different incubation programs, a lot of them have pivoted in their early days. And so naturally, you want to invest probably in the best people who can pivot regardless of the idea that they're working on. And so recently, like when AI kind of exploded and became very popular, like generative AI specifically, like you naturally like if you wanted to raise money, like it'd be easier to raise money if you had some form of like AI related to your product, right? And so I think being able to adapt regardless of the headwinds or tailwinds is very important. Now, I'm not saying you should necessarily like build like an AI startup, but I think being able to adapt whenever the macro and micro environment kind of changes around you, that's very important. And so the team is like probably one of the most important and like key areas. And like just having experience like building, products in the past and like exiting or even like having that startup experience is like very valuable in terms of like what venture investors look for.
Interesting. And we're talking about investors and we're talking about how to attract investors. But on the Startup Product Manager, on the book that you wrote, you also thought about how can you become an angel investor and how can you invest on other products, which I also thought that was a really good jump from how to get investors to also becoming an investor yourself. Manan, last but not least, what is you quite have a lot of experience in product management. You still have, of course, as all of us, a long way ahead. But you seem to be doing very, very good in product management, and also you took the effort to write a book. But what is your advice to aspiring product managers who are listening right now, who are still starting out as a new career? Maybe they have a technical background, they're trying to upskill themselves in the business. Maybe they have business, they're trying to skill them on technical. What is your advice to those people on how to approach product management so that they can become successful? Besides all of what we discussed, maybe at a higher level advice on why should they become product managers and what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a few things that you can do regardless of your background. So I think first, as mentioned before, regardless of your background, whether you have experience or not, you can find a way to get into product management. I think the book highlights a lot of the different like strategies you could use to do that. And there's like there's like very like like practical steps you could take to be able to like break into product management as a startup or even in big tech that you can learn from the book. But I think the one thing that I want to emphasize is like taking like a skills based approach. So typically product management in big tech, like you go through like different interview processes and like you have to like prepare for those processes, like do a lot of case studies and like prep and like do a lot of interviews. So I think that's like an interesting, approach to being able to like become a product manager. But I think another way to look at it is like you're building skills, whether you're preparing for interviews or whether you're, like trying to build something on your own one day. So I think taking that approach of like looking at your background, looking at the skills that you have and being able to pitch them is very important. The second piece of advice that I would give is like, just like start like building stuff. So like whether it's like, posting an event or, building a side project or building a business, it doesn't have to necessarily generate revenue, but I think there's a lot that you learn from just the process of like building stuff, like learning how to work with people, delegating different things and like growing as a leader overall. So whether it's something that you've done on campus or even like, you've done in the real world, like at a job or like even somewhere else, I think like there's just a lot of like different things that you can do to like learn like how to build. And then I'd say the third kind of like bucket there is like, like learning like how to sell. So like whether you're building a side project or whether you're applying for product management roles or reaching out to founders and like learning about what they're building, I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do around learning like how to like pitch yourself. So in the book we talk a lot about like how to like sell and like how to pitch, but what I advise is like you like once you learn like how to build something, you learn like how to sell it. And then also you should like focus on like how to sell your experiences and then sell your background because like your career essentially like is a product itself.
Exactly.
There's a product that changes and grows over time. And so what I would advise is like looking at it like you're building your own startup like that is your career and you're like learning like how to distribute that and sell it over time.
That's a very good point. Your brand is also your product and you should definitely sell it as a product. If you want to learn more about the book, you can find it on Amazon. Manan Modi, The Startup Product Manager, a guide to becoming a product manager and startup builder. Now, as you know, this podcast is part of the Product League Club at UT Dallas, a club that I have co-founded along with 40D students. If you are planning to become a member at the Product League Club, join now because this is the best moment. You want to know why? That is because the first 5 new members joining on our club after this podcast is released will get a copy of the Startup Product Managers. We're giving away 5 copies to 5 people, first come, first serve basis. To become a member, just visit our website www.theproductleague.com. Thank you for listening to the Product League podcast. See you at the next episode.